It's here. So a couple of weeks ago, I was lucky enough to be invited out to Tromsø in Norway by Lumix for the announcement of the S1Rii. They did gift this camera to me. They have not asked me to make this video. No money has exchanged hands, and all of the thoughts in this video are entirely my own. So this is just going to be a bit of a brief overview video. I am going to have a load more videos coming on this camera, all related to photography, video, and how to get this set up so you can get the best from it. And I do actually have another video out at the same time as this one where I go out and use the S1Rii in the real world for some photography. So go and check that out after this video if you want to. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the other videos as well. For me personally, this is the camera that I've been waiting for from Lumix for a very long time. And it just reaffirms as to how serious Lumix are about pushing the world of photography as well. And I do genuinely think that this camera will start to grab the attention of a lot of people that shoot with other brands. So the S1Rii has a 44 megapixel sensor, which is a really nice bump up from the likes of the S5, the S5 II and the S9, which all have 24 megapixel sensors. And it is their highest resolution camera since the original Lumix S1Rii. Now with that 44 megapixel sensor, you can push that up to 177 megapixels using high resolution mode, whether that's on a tripod or handheld, where it will stitch together, I think it's 8 photos into one high resolution raw file. 177 megapixels, that is insane. I will just point out though, I have made a lot of videos on this channel where I talk about how megapixels don't actually matter. But to have that available for when you need it, if you ever need 177 megapixels, is really nice. A 44 megapixel sensor I think is pretty much the perfect sweet spot for most things. When you're shooting in electronic shutter, it can shoot up to 40 frames per second, and with the mechanical shutter it can shoot up to 10 frames a second, also with a 1.5 second pre-burst. And that is absolutely perfect if you are a wildlife photographer or a sports photographer, because there's nothing worse than waiting around for that shot and then it happens, you press the shutter and you flick back through your photos only to realize that you weren't quick enough and you missed that moment. With a 1.5 second pre-burst, it means that the camera will capture 1.5 seconds before you hit the shutter. So it gives you a little bit of extra leeway to make sure that you never miss that perfect moment of that bird taking flight or that ball being kicked across the field. There has been a huge improvement to the EVF over the S5 with a 5.76 million dot EVF, and it looks absolutely stunning. It is so sharp, really crisp, amazing colors. And I've never really been a huge EVF user up until maybe the last year or so, when I've really started to use it just a little bit more, because I think for my sorts of photography, it allows me to just help compose the smaller details a little bit easier than using the main LCD display. So to have the improvements to the EVF is absolutely amazing. The display on the back of this also flips around in any direction that you could possibly want it. So you got up, you got down, you can flip it out, spin it round. It's one of those, what do you call them? Multi-angle, multi-vari-angle, vari-angle, maybe just vari-angle, I don't know. It's got one of those. Now I know a lot of cameras do have these now. I think Sony put them on theirs quite a lot, but every camera should have one of these now. If you ever used the original Lumix S1Rii, you'll know that it felt really good to hold in your hand. It was solid, it was chunky, but it was huge. This new S1Rii is around about 20% smaller than the original S1Rii, but it is actually, in fact, very similar in size to the S5 II, which I think is genuinely quite impressive, because the screen on the S5 II, just flips out to the side, as we all know. On the S1R2, it fully articulates in every direction that you could possibly want it to. So to fit this display onto this body that is very similar in size to the S5 II, I think is genuinely quite impressive. I don't know if they've improved the display on the S1R2, because it does seem a lot sharper and a lot crisper than on the S5 II. It's a really nice display. Even though it is very similar in size to the S5 II, the grip just feels a little bit more chunky than on the S5 II. But again, I don't really know why, because they are practically identical in size and shape, but there's something about it that just feels a bit more robust than compared to the S5 II. I really like it. What I really like about the S1R2 are a lot of the small changes that have been made that make a very big difference to the overall usability. So for example, the LVF button that is on the back of the S5 II to allow you to switch between viewfinder and automatic viewfinder, that has now been moved to a little button just on the top of the viewfinder, which means that there is plenty of room to be able to put a locking switch in place so that you can lock the camera, and it means you're not going to accidentally flick any settings while you're filming or shooting. We also get a brand new photo, video and S&Q mode switch, which is really handy, and it allows you to use so many more custom modes, and it allows you to switch between photo and video so much quicker as well. So for example, if you have a custom mode saved to custom mode 1 and you have that set up to shoot 4K 25 frames a second, on the S5 that would only be able to be used for 4K 25 frames a second. On the S1R2 you could then switch that over into photo mode using the dial on the top left, and then you can save a photo custom mode to that same C1 preset, which allows you to have so many more custom modes set up and to be able to switch between photo and video much quicker than you could on the S5s. With the dials on the top of the camera as well, these are now also lockable, which they weren't on the S5, so to be able to just lock them is nice peace of mind that you're not going to accidentally switch anything while you're filming. With this dial on the top right corner as well, sort of where you hold the camera, on the S5 you remember that it was right on the edge and it was really easy to accidentally flick the dial while you were filming and change your shutter speed, for example. On the S1R2 they have moved that in the body a little bit more, so there's a nice gap, which means that you don't knock it quite as easily. What's really nice as a photographer, and this just goes to show how committed Lumix are towards pushing the photography side of things, because they haven't necessarily been known for their photography as much as their video over the years, but now they have teamed up with Capture One. So if you work in a studio, maybe you're a portrait photographer, you can tether straight into Capture One using your S1R2. First time you've ever been able to do that with a Lumix camera, and that can assist with all of your different production workflows. And I genuinely think that over time that will start to gain the attention of a lot of photographers that are shooting other brands, and this will start to be a camera that appeals to a lot of other people. Moving on to some video specs, which are genuinely so impressive, and it's not something that I was expecting with the S1R2, I'll be honest, because I was expecting it to be pretty much purely a photography based camera, but they have not shied away with the video features in here. It can shoot up to 8K 30 frames a second, and in a future firmware update, I'm not sure when that firmware update will be, but you'll be able to shoot 8K OpenGate. And that's all with 10-bit Vlog colors as well. It can shoot 5.8K ProRes RAW video internally to the CF Express Type B card. It can shoot 4K up to 120 frames a second with no crop. That's no crop in 25, 50 or 100 frames a second, which is what a lot of people wanted in the S5 II, even just 4K 50 without a crop. Now we get up to 120 frames a second with no crop. We also get 32-bit float audio if you use the new XLR2 adapter on the top, which was announced at the same time as the GH7. You can still use the original XLR handle, but you don't get 32-bit float with that. And then there are also some really other nice features added to the S1R2, such as front and back tally lamps, which is really useful for if your camera's on the other side of the room, you know you've hit record. We also get false color, which is a really nice video assist feature, and it's a very popular feature to be able to check your exposure on the back of the camera. Previously, if you wanted to use false color for your exposure, you would have had to use an external monitor. And that's the same with I think most mirrorless cameras, so it's really nice to have false color built into this now as well. We also get this front red record button, which is also on the GH7. We now get it on the S1R2. One of my absolutely favorite new features though, and it's something so small, but it makes a massive difference, and it's something that I've wanted for a very long time. That is that the sensor, when you turn the camera off, now closes. So if I turn the camera on, pops open, and it closes. I love that. It's such a small thing, and I know it's on other cameras, but I love it. And it just gives you a little bit of peace of mind that the sensor is always going to be protected when you are changing lenses and things like that. Autofocus is something that is spoken about a lot in Lumix cameras. Ever since they announced the S5 II and introduced the phase detect autofocus system with that camera, and with the S1R2 it is taken to the next level again because it introduces AI into the autofocus system, and it is absolutely brilliant. I have not had any trouble with it whatsoever, and I know that I can rely on it in any situation that I need it. I used the S1R2 to record my previous YouTube video that was up last week. Lumix have already updated firmware updates in the 2 weeks that I have had this camera to the autofocus system, and I think they will continue to over the months and years that people buy this camera. They're still releasing firmware updates for the S5 II, so it's something that they're always committed to doing. But yeah, autofocus, absolutely brilliant on this camera. I wouldn't say that I'm someone that relies heavily on autofocus. I don't do a lot of wildlife or sports photography and things like that. The things that I focus on are pretty slow moving subjects and still life and things like that. So I'm not someone that needs high speed autofocus, but for the things I've relied on it for, not had any issues. It is absolutely brilliant. As with any camera, there are also a couple of small quirks that just take a little bit of getting used to. And one for me is this front red record button. And I know exactly why it is there, and it is incredibly useful for a lot of people. But for me, that is mainly a photographer, I do find myself knocking it, and it just gets in the way a little bit when I'm raising the camera to my eye, or I'm flicking through the photos that I've taken and I'm holding it like that. I find myself knocking that button a little bit, and it just gets a little bit frustrating. You can reassign it to something else though if you want to, so it's not the end of the world. Another thing that is ever so slightly frustrating is that the base ISOs that we're used to using on the S5 II, S5, S9 for example, have changed. So for example, if you are shooting in vlog on the S5 II, your base ISO is 640, and then you have a second base of 4000 if you needed to push it up to that to get a cleaner image at a higher ISO. On the S1R2, your base ISO is 200 in vlog, and then your second base is 1000. If though you stick the camera into dynamic range boost mode, that then goes to a base ISO of, let me just double check, 400, and a higher base ISO of 2000. So by putting the S1R2 into dynamic range boost, that then gives you an incredible almost 14 stops of dynamic range, which is absolutely insane and incredibly useful. And it does also boost your ISO to slightly higher levels. If you do put your camera into dynamic range boost mode though, it does slightly increase rolling shutter. So it is really handy if, for example, you're filming interviews, maybe you've got a window in the background and you don't want to blow it out, you need a little bit of extra dynamic range. Just be aware that if you're shooting handheld, you might get a little bit more rolling shutter. But going back to the base ISOs, I still find myself shooting at ISO 640 and 4000 just because that is what I'm used to using. I've used the S5 II, S5 for the last 3 years or so, so it's just habit. It is not a problem because the image still looks amazing when you are shooting at those ISOs. It's just something to be aware of, that for the cleanest image, the most dynamic range, you want to be shooting at 200 or 1000, or with dynamic range boost it's 400 and 4000. Is that right? 402,000. Now, I'm not technically minded enough to know why the base ISOs have changed from the S5 II. I'm sure there is a perfectly logistical reason as to why that is the case. It's just something that is a little bit frustrating while you're getting used to it, just because we're used to something different on the S5 II. But it's really, not an issue. These two things, the front button and the base ISOs, are just me nitpicking. It's absolutely not an issue at all. This is an absolute beast of a camera, and it is the camera that I've been waiting ever so long for from Lumix. I've wanted a high resolution camera from them that is come out after the original S1R for a long time, and I don't think it disappoints. It is an absolute beast. I absolutely love it, and this is now going to become my workhorse of a camera every single day. And I think for someone like me and other YouTube creators, solo creators, you cannot go wrong with this. This is more camera than you need. It is amazing. And I've not even mentioned the price. The price starts at $3,000 for just the body. The Canon R5 II, which is probably its closest competitor, starts at, well, let's have a look. What does the Canon R5 II start at? The R5 II starts at $5,000. $2,000 cheaper. The A7R5, nearly $4,000. $3,000. It's insane. The amount of camera that you're getting here for the price is completely nuts. So that is a very quick look at the brand new Lumix S1R2. This is a lot of camera. It is absolutely amazing, and I genuinely think that for solo creators this is going to make life so much easier, especially if you shoot photo and video. And I'm going to have a load more videos all about the S1R2 coming out very soon, all about how to get it set up so that you can get the most from it, and then taking it out into the field, using it in the real world. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on those videos. Let me know your thoughts, most importantly, about the S1R2. Are you impressed with it? Is there something that you're not quite sure about? Let me know in the comments below. Are you excited about it? Anything, just let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, loads more videos coming on the S1R2. I do have another video out at the same time as this one, as I mentioned before, so go and check that one out. I will link it in the description below. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.